This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. This week, Dan Lynch and I talk with Devin Ulibarri and Walter Fender of Sugar Labs and Music Blocks about how kids learn music, how you can learn music, how music is connected to math and vice versa, how we're composing music as well as listening to it, how you can compose as much music as you listen to. It's all possible. And these guys are teaching it. They've written the code. It's an open source project. And this is one of those shows I hope you're watching because we actually do some demo on this. But it's fabulous even if you listen, and that is coming up next.
Once again, time for the TWiT Audience Survey. The annual survey helps us understand you so we can make your listening experience even better. It only takes a couple of minutes, but it sure helps us out a lot. Completely optional, but if you could, please go to twit.tv/survey23. That's twit.tv/survey23. You have till the end of the month, but if you would do me a favor and do it today, I could stop mentioning it. twit.tv/survey23, and thanks in advance.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly, episode 714, recorded Wednesday, January 11th, 2023. Sugar Labs and Music Blocks. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Barracuda. Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cybercriminals use them every day. Phishing, conversation hacking, ransomware, plus 10 more tricks cybercriminals use to steal money from your company or personal information from your employees and customers. Get your free ebook at barracuda.com/twit. And by ACI Learning. Respected companies and government agencies around the globe turn to ACI Learning year after year to help them maintain their competitive edge. Supporting organizations across audit, IT, and cybersecurity readiness, ACI Learning keeps your team at the top of its game. Visit acilearning.com to learn more. Hello again, everybody, everywhere. I am Doc Searls. This is FLOSS Weekly, and I am joined this week by Dan Lynch himself there in Liverpool, I assume, because your background has not changed.
No, it hasn't. No, just outside Liverpool in England. Yeah. Hey, Doc, good to be back. Happy New Year to everyone. It's the first time I've had a chance to. I know it feels too late to be saying Happy New Year now, but first chance I've had this year. So Happy New Year to everyone watching and listening.
That's
and
great.
Yourself, of course.
Yeah, it's same here. We're 1/20th into the year already, I think. But
I know.
I'm here in Santa Barbara. My office is Santa Barbara, and we have had torrential, interesting rains. I just blogged about it. If you go to searls.com, doc.searls.com, you'll see what I blogged about it. The jet stream across the Pacific is going straight, is whipping up all these eddies along it. And you don't see where it comes from unless you. There's a great site called windy.com. It's also an app called Windy. And if you go up and look at the highest levels, like their flight levels, you can see why planes like to ride the jet stream in one direction and fight it in the other direction or avoid it. Why it may take as little as 5 hours to get from Dulles to Heathrow and 8 hours to get back. So anyway. That's all interesting stuff. So Dan, I called you in because you're the music guy. I could tell by you have at least 2 instruments in your background. You also operate a microphone. So yeah, I
do also have a microphone. Yeah, I've got other instruments around the house as well, but I'll refrain from jumping on and playing.
So what do you play? What are you?
So I play guitar, piano, keyboards, drums, bass, harmonica. I always wanted to learn the saxophone, but I haven't quite got around to that yet. It's quite hard, apparently. So that's my next project, is to learn the saxophone, hopefully. But yeah, I did go to, I shouldn't say all this stuff because I'll look really stupid later when I ask bad questions, but I went to music college many years ago after I left school. So I wouldn't say I'm not classically trained. I went to a rock college. That sounds cool. It sounds cooler than it probably was. But yeah, I went and did a course there where we did stuff like recording, performance, technology, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I ended up getting a diploma in rock and pop music. Would you believe? So,
wow,
yeah.
Excellent.
Wow.
And I just quickly before we get to our guests, were you in a band, or are you in a number of bands?
I've been in many bands over the years. Some people I'm not in one at the moment, but some people watching and listening to this will remember I was in a band called 20 Pound Sounds, and we had quite a popular song about Jimmy Carter, which the opening line was Jimmy Carter was a peanut farmer. And that was what the song came about because we were having a rehearsal one day and he was on the news and someone mentioned Jimmy Carter and I went, oh, the one random fact I happened to know was that he was a peanut farmer. So I went, oh, Jimmy Carter was a peanut farmer. And one of the other guys went, oh, that sounds like the start of a song. And then it became a song. So there you go.
Oh, wow.
So that was good. Yeah. So you can still find our stuff online, 20 Pound Sounds. It's pounds as in weight. LB, 20 LB. Yeah, so they're still around, and you can find stuff on my website, danlynch.org. There's all kinds of stuff on there.
So, our guests today are with the Sugar Labs and working with music blocks. Are you familiar with this before the show, or is it new to you?
It was new to me, before we got the information. But I've spent the day messing around with it and doing some research and hopefully figuring out the ins and outs of it a little bit. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun with it. It's a really interesting project. I can't wait to talk more about it.
So let me introduce our guests, and first Walter Bender, because I'm going left to right on my screen. But he conveniently has a Wikipedia entry that's rather huge. He's a technologist, a researcher, it says, who works in the field of electronic publishing, media and technology for learning. He was involved in MIT's Media Lab, and it goes on. And he's an alma mater of Harvard and MIT, and he was involved with the Media Lab, like I said. And Devin Ulibarri is a guitarist. He's performed besides musicians such as Yo-Yo Ma and the Silk Road Ensemble, and many other inspiring figures. He's a teacher. He was taught at the New England Conservatory, conducted research for the Center for Music and Education, co-founder of the MAP Family Learning Center, which offers instruction in music and so on. I could go on. He works at the Free Software Foundation, which I'm sure our listeners and viewers would fully approve of. So I'll just ask you guys first. Are you both in Cambridge or nearby?
Yeah. I'm just outside of Boston to the west, and Devin's just north.
Well, I lived in Arlington for 7 years. So what town are you in?
I'm in Newton.
In Newton. Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm in Somerville.
It's the most densely populated part of Boston. I found out at the Science Museum. You click on a little button that brings up the light in Somerville, and it says, nope, this is the most densely populated part, which kind of surprised me. So how'd you guys meet, and how did this thing come about? Either one of you can answer.
So I was giving a talk at a FLOSS gathering in Boston, actually in Cambridge, but it was I think the Boston FLOSS community, and I was talking about programming languages for kids. I'd done a project called, or a language called Turtle Blocks. And Devin came up to me afterward and said, hey, you ever thought about doing anything with music? And I said, I've been thinking about it forever, but I've never found anybody to work with who knows much about music. And it just happened. Devin, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Enlarge on that.
So I was interested in attending Walter's talk because he was talking about Sugar Labs, and I became interested in free software maybe about a year before I saw this talk. It was just a local gathering, so I kind of came up with this theory that, if kids have access to the source code, for example, and they're given everything they need to remix it, and make it their own, that they'd probably learn a lot from it. So when I saw that Walter Bender was giving this talk on Sugar Labs, the operating system, Sugar Labs operating system, and one laptop per child, I was like, well, this is amazing. I want to hear more about this. I didn't know at the time that, he'd be interested in hearing from a musician, but apparently so. I'll admit when we started working together, I didn't know what we were inevitably going to create. I came up with some designs which are radically different from anything that we have today. But fast forward, 7 or so years later to today, we created a visual programming language for music.
Just one little aside to what Devin just said, just because I'm proud of this fact. 50% of the patches in Sugar came from kids.
Oh, wow.
So we actually really put a lot of thought into having the kids be contributors, and it worked.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's great to hear that the kids are involved and getting involved. So I suppose that leads me nicely into, before we get into looking at music blocks and playing around with it. So what's the kind of technology behind it? What's it written in? I presume JavaScript or something like that. This is probably one for Walter, I'm assuming.
No,
so is that what the kids are contributing with?
Yeah, no. So the kids were contributing to Sugar, which is mostly Python.
Right.
And then we've had some kids contribute to music blocks as well. But music blocks, basically what happens, I've written this programming language, Turtle Blocks, in Python, and then decided to make a JavaScript version of it so that I could reach more kids who didn't have access to Sugar, basically. And then, so we decided to build music blocks on top of the JavaScript version of the language. And so it's JavaScript, but we do have a fair number of contribution from kids in music blocks itself. And we also have a planet where kids share and remix the projects they build on top of that. But some of the core language comes from kid contributions, kid commits.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I was looking when I was playing around today with music blocks. I had a little go of it in the browser. It immediately the visual of it, or the kind of metaphor, or whatever you want to call it, of the visual programming language, made me think a bit of something like Scratch, which is MIT related as well. Obviously, you have a long history at MIT. Is there any is that inspiration in any way?
I would say in terms of like the family tree of these kinds of programming languages, music blocks is like a second cousin to Scratch. They both came from the same hierarchy, but there's actually there are a few different things that are quite different about music blocks than Scratch. Some of them are little details that are just my pet peeves, about infix versus prefix and things like that. But music blocks is really about, at its heart, the at the core of music blocks is a musical concept called the note. So everything builds from that, as opposed to talking to a synthesizer as sort of something you tack onto the language. The concept of a note is inherent in the language. And so by a note, basically what we're talking about is a temporal quanta that you can position anywhere and then pack things in. So typically you pack pitches into a note. So you'd say, I want to play a quarter note at, C4, at this time. That's sort of but I could put graphics in there, or I could put multiple pitches or anything I want inside of a note. So we've got sort of this holder that we can drop things into. So it's a really very different way of thinking about the underlying data structures that the kids are manipulating. And then the other thing is that, I could get that far without Devin, but with Devin, on top of that, we've layered all these musical concepts that are part of the language. So, for example, something really quite simple, you can define a key and a mode in music blocks and then stay in that key and mode. So you can talk about not just give me the next note in terms of hertz or something, but you can say, take 3 scalar steps, or transpose this way or that way, or invert, or there's all these concepts that are fundamental to music that are part of the language itself.
That's excellent. I wanted to ask Devin about the when I watched one of your videos earlier on the blog on the on the Music Blocks blog, and it was, I think it may have been quite an old one, but it was an intro to what you found cool about Music Blocks and so on.
Yeah,
and
that's an old one.
It's okay, but one of the things that I found really interesting was it's not stuck in musical terms. It's kind of really kind of freeform. You're not stuck with a 4/4, time signature or any of that stuff. You can kind of create whatever you want. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So, working on Music Blocks, forced me to kind of think of design a little bit. But it's important not to start from, like you must have, only 4 beats per measure, for example, and state that up front, because, that's not the way we listen, for one. When someone hits the first downbeat, or, the pickup to the downbeat, they start playing, like, you don't know at that moment, where you are in the measure, right? You don't know what's going to happen next. And a lot of musicians, like, take advantage of expectations, so that they can do something unexpected later, and then there's a lot of music that, switches time signatures. Like, we'll do something that's in 3/4 time, and then we'll do something that's in 4/4 time. And also that's kind of an abstract concept, whereas just like a note that you can play, and you can hear how long it is less abstract. So it's, more accessible, readily to, learners at the very beginning. I didn't want to put any artificial constraints on, what people were going to do. Also, so like if you look at, music, like sheet music, you've got bar lines, and they're like kind of in your face. It's like, oh my gosh, there's like a bar line. There's like something there. But, when you're listening to something, there's no bar line. There's, you don't hear the bar line. I mean, you construct the bar line in your mind. You say like, oh, I hear things are repeating, like every, 3 beats, I hear some things repeating there. Therefore, this is in 3/4 time. I hear something important repeating every 4 beats. Therefore, it must be in 4/4 time. Nothing, like when you're performing something, you don't like necessarily like do something like at the bar line. It's a measure for a reason. Like it measures time. It's not like a thing that you perform. So yeah, that's one of the reasons, that it's like that. But that being said, there is a block in Music Blocks where you can state, that you're in 3/4 time, or 4/4 time, or 5/8 time, or 5/16 time, like whatever you want. And then you can say things like, okay, so on beats 1 and 2, do this thing, play the kick drum, or, do X, Y, and Z. But I think for people listening and watching, maybe they will, want to see and hear, some of what that is, to get a better sense of of what we're talking about. But it is. It's freeform, because like an instrument, for example, is freeform. Like it doesn't have like measures or bar lines or anything. And Music Blocks, in its essence, is an instrument.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking it might be popular for jazz. I don't know, or something like freeform jazz. I don't know. So one of the things that was interesting was because you haven't got, as you said, there's no constraints, and you're kind of teaching music and programming to kids. Is that good? Good for that? Because kids often don't have the concept of what the structure should be, and they come up with really inventive things.
With there's no constraints. I think there actually are constraints.
Okay. Sorry.
Now you can bend those constraints any way you want. You don't have to stay in the lane, but the lanes are there to give you sort of a point of departure, as opposed to saying you have to do it. We don't sort of have the kids assume the position, but we actually let the kids work with musical concepts and then start to shape those concepts. So we have, for example, when you start off Music Blocks by default, you get, sort of a Western, piano tuning, 12 equal temperament tuning, but you can change the temperament. Okay, you can do you can define your own temperament or choose from a number of historical temperaments. So the idea is temperament is this musical concept that's really well ground into most music, not all music, but most music. And so we give the kids that framework. They don't need to stay in that framework, but we give that framework because that framework is really a powerful way. Again, as Devin was talking about, this idea in music of expectation and violation of expectation. Having these frameworks gives you the expectation, and then you can tweak it and play with it and go off in your own direction. But the frameworks are there, and I think that's actually a really important part of music blocks, is that it's not just raw hertz. It's this framework that you can work from and
Yeah.
I want to dig down a little further on how it's being used in the world, but first I have to let our listeners and viewers know that this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Barracuda. In a recent email trends survey, 43% of respondents said they have been victims of spear phishing attacks, but only 23% said they have dedicated spear phishing protection. How are you going to keep your emails secure? Well, Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cyber criminals use them every day. Phishing, conversation hacking, ransomware, plus 10 more tricks cyber criminals use to steal money from your company or your personal information from your employees and customers. Are you protected against all 13 types? Email cybercrime is becoming more sophisticated and attacks are more difficult to prevent. Attacks use social engineering, including urgency and fear, to prey on victims. Social engineering attacks, including spear phishing and business email compromise, cost businesses an average of $130,000 per incident. As demand for COVID-19 tests increased at the start of 2022, Barracuda researchers saw an increase in COVID-19 test-related phishing attacks increase by 521% between October and January. As public interest rises, for example, in cryptocurrency, the opportunity for attacks becomes ripe as the price of Bitcoin increased by almost 400% between October 2020 and April 2021. Barracuda research also found that impersonation attacks grew 192% in the same period. In 2020, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, that's the IC3, received 19,369 business email compromise, that's BEC, email account compromise, also called EAC, complaints with adjusted losses of over 1.8 billion. So securing email at the gateway level is not enough anymore. It is still important to leverage gateway security to protect against traditional attacks, such as viruses, zero-day ransomware, spam, and other threats. But your gateway is defenseless against targeted attacks. Protection at the inbox level, including AI and machine learning, is necessary to detect and stop the most sophisticated threats. Get a free copy of the Barracuda Report, 13 email threat types to know about right now, and you'll see how the cyber criminals are getting more and more sophisticated every day, and how you can build the best protection for your business, data, and people with Barracuda. Find out about the 13 email threat types you need to know and about how Barracuda can provide complete email protection for your teams, your customers, and your reputation. Get your free ebook at barracuda.com/twit. That's barracuda.com/twit. Barracuda, your journey secured. So I'm wondering how is music blocks being used in schools? I'm wondering if is entirely the kids picking it up on their own? Are teachers using it? Is it part of curricula in schools? What age range are you kind of looking at? And so all that stuff.
So it's a mix. So it is being used in different schools. Teachers have lesson plans that they can use. Typically, and I teach it, and in one of the places that I teach at, Walter teaches it. So the youngest group is like 6 and 7 years old that I've worked with. And right now we have about 35 different lesson plans. In Japan, we work together with the Ministry of Economics, Trade and Industry, and a publishing company called Gakken. It's a very big publishing company in Japan. And we worked together with them I think they made, I don't know, about like 10 or so lesson plans in the end, and made some videos for teachers to use. They were interested in using these in the public schools because in Japan they have a mandate or at that time, this was like 2019, that by 2020 they would have computer programming in all the elementary schools in Japan. So they were interested in using music blocks as one of the tools to teach kids about programming.
Just one other sort of large-scale initiative is in Peru. So during COVID, the Ministry of Education in Peru distributed Android tablets with music blocks on it, and we translated music blocks into Aymara and Quechua, which are two of the big indigenous languages in Peru, because these tablets were all going out into rural parts of the country. So it's got a pretty widespread distribution in Peru. And then it's just sort of hit and miss beyond that all over the world.
Is it spreading? I'm thinking you've already mentioned Japan and Peru and two additional languages within Peru. Are people picking it up at random? Do you evangelize this at all, or do you just kind of like deal with demand as it shows up?
Well, we're evangelizing right now.
Good job.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're not aggressive marketers. It's just not in our DNA for whatever reason. But we certainly we're doing this because we want kids to use it and learn from it, and we believe in it. And it's got, I mean, a lot of the pedagogy behind music blocks comes from work that I've been doing at MIT for decades in collaboration with people like Marvin Minsky and Seymour Papert. So it's not new in terms of pedagogy. Devin and I participate in a community called Constructionism, which is sort of basically the Seymour Papert School of Learning that sort of outlives him. So we're trying to get these ideas out into the world, and any help that the audience can give us towards that end, that'd be great. But it is, it's free and open. It's, we encourage people to use it, modify it, remix it, do whatever is going to get the job done for them.
Yeah, and on a weekly basis, I meet with a teacher or a few teachers, and I instruct them, and give them feedback on their lesson plans. So we have teachers making their own lesson plans, sometimes they just need like a little bit of help. One in particular is doing a great job creating some new lesson plans. Like really the sky's the limit. And then also, there's some projects on music blocks, and we can show you in a second, such as like I've got this virtual whiteboard. So say you're not teaching computer programming in particular, and you're just teaching, just general music class, you can pull up, some of these projects, and they can be quite useful, even if you're not necessarily going to explain, all the logic behind. So this is music blocks right here. This is what somebody sees when they open it up for the first time. So when you, just keep that open for a second. And then maybe actually, can you click on Do and then just like go through the scale? So go Do, Re, Mi, and then go all the way through. So just right there, you have a representation of music, that helps reinforce something that a teacher might want to teach. It's like, okay, so solfege is, part of the musical language. Here you have them all in order, and you can manipulate them from the very beginning. So, that's a really helpful thing, and you can, it goes in a circle. You have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then it goes back to do, because that would bring you into the next octave. I'm often drawing something like that on the board to show, okay, so these are the 7 pitches you have. And with music blocks, it's just like baked into the interface itself. And then the one extra thing is you need a number for the octave, where the higher number is a higher octave. Because without specifying that, then, you're just kind of stuck in one octave. From that perspective, like you can, just from the very beginning, you can reinforce some important musical ideas.
Do the kids learn like this is a diatonic scale and what half steps are between the 2 adjacent white keys and the white and the black keys and that kind of thing on a piano? I remember when I took piano lessons as a kid, I had a horrible teacher. All she did was maybe run scales and play music I didn't care about. And it wasn't until I had a girlfriend 1,000 years later who went to the Jacobs School of Music in Bloomington, Indiana, which is where I live now most of the time. And then I learned this stuff. I had no idea, and I think it helps for kids to learn that kind of thing early.
Let me answer that in a couple of different ways. And Devin, I'm sure, has a better. So one of the inspirations of a lot of this is, again, this concept called constructionism. You learn through doing. So if you want more learning, you want more doing. So a lot of what we try to do is encourage the kids to build things. So in music blocks, the kids are composing right from the very beginning. They're not, so they're not just playing scales, but they're writing music right from the very beginning with the language. And so they hit a lot of those concepts. And again, we've got some sort of macro level tools for composition as well. There's something called the action block, which is essentially the way to create a phrase. And once you've got this phrase or your melody, you can manipulate your melody, you can repeat it, you can flip it upside down, you can make it change the second time it plays. And these are all things that kids explore right from the very beginning. In terms of things like scale, we expose both sort of scale or stay in the key and half steps. So you can essentially a chromatic scale, so you can go anywhere you want, and the kids can move between those two. They're sort of constructions and instructions blocks that let you manipulate both in both those ways. There are also tools to generate chords. We recently added arpeggio, which is actually really super fun. So you can start to do some of these extensions. You take your basic set of notes that you've composed with, and you can extend them in all these different ways that musicians do. It's musical concepts, again, that we're layering in. So Devin, do you want to handle it too?
Yeah, so actually this is one of the really exciting things about music blocks is, in most typical, classrooms, it's by far assumed that, you might not get to composition until the kids have learned how to read, for example. And reading takes quite a while. You've got to teach, that you've got, pitch over time, for example, that, there's, this is where note A and B and C and D, and you've got these different key signatures and things like that. And so if you start from that assumption that, kids need to learn how to read music first before they compose, that's a lot of time that they're not composing, right? They're not creating their own music. They're not exploring important music theory concepts and, by themselves. But, with this tool, it's like from the very beginning, it puts all of those music theory concepts, like Walter said, there's, scalar versus chromatic or semitone, the different kinds of note values, the different kinds of keys, the different kinds of intervals, the different kinds of chords, they're blocks in this language. And so it can make, some of those much more accessible, much more quickly, and then have kids, not just, learn them, but explore them, sooner, which is a lot of fun. And it's like, yeah, you can have kids, on their instrument, compose things. I do that in my class, or, they can sing, they can do like songwriting, and they don't necessarily need to be able to read. But music literacy, like having something written down, is a useful thing, and I would argue that what you have with music blocks is you have a way to express, to write down your ideas. And in fact, we haven't shown you this yet, but anything that you make in music blocks, you can export as Lily Pond code, right? And then you can use the Lily Pond code to generate sheet music. So you can like turn it full circle, and have the kids compose something, export it as Lily Pond, generate a PDF, and then bring them to the piano or the guitar or whatever instrument they're learning, and say, okay, you compose this on music blocks, and now let's perform it. And that can be a really powerful thing for kids that are learning, because then they're motivated. It's like, I wrote this, now I got to play what I wrote. So
the other, just one other point, that because music blocks was sort of built from on top of turtle blocks, there's all this art built into music blocks as well. So one of the things the kids do is they build their own notation systems in music blocks. They don't have to stick with sort of the traditional little dots on striped lines. They can develop their own notations, and they do that quite a bit as well, on their way to learning. So it's not one fixed thing. The other thing I want to bring up, and maybe this is a little bit premature, but we also have this concept of music blocks that I didn't build into turtle blocks, called widgets. And what a widget is it's sort of a little idealet. It's this, I want to explore this one little concept of music. We've got dozens of widgets that explore dozens of little concepts. So for example, there's a widget that lets you explore rhythm, and you pop it open and you basically have a drum machine that you can manipulate. But the cool thing about widgets is they let you explore that idea, but you can also then export what you built back as music blocks code. So you can
maybe we should.
Yeah. Do you want to show like the rhythm?
Yeah.
Tool?
So go down to the bottom of the palette, where it says widgets. So just a little to the left of where you are right now. Yeah. And then Rhythm Maker. It's like the third block down from the top, or was. There you go. Okay, now exit out of this. Press the X, and then exit out of the tour. Otherwise, it's just going to be there. And now click on it. Click right there. And so by default, you have a whole note. It's a whole length of time, which is kind of a long time. Okay, now stop that.
We had that, all right.
And then click in the middle, and it'll divide it in half. No, click in the middle where it says 1/1. Yeah, and now you get two halves. And now click on one of those halves. Yeah, click right there. And then click like one more time on one of the quarter notes. Yeah, so
yeah.
And now, you could click on that one, and you'll get now press play, and you'll have something a little more interesting than the. So it's still whole note, right? It's going to fit in a full measure of 4/4. We were talking about meters at the very beginning. Anything that you do, by the way, is going to fit into 4/4. But And then can you not make it full screen, because I can't see the whole thing, and I'm not sure if others can either. And then once you have that, then press one of the ones in the left where it has a down arrow under the play within the rhythm maker, and that will save it as code. Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, that's cool.
So now you've got a drum machine.
You have a drum machine, and I love how this. By the way, this is probably the first show we have where I highly recommend, even if you're listening right now, go look at the video version.
Yes.
and better yet, get this tool and play with it, because I want to, and there it is. It's a.
So there are tools for rhythm. There's tools for making phrases. There's tools for manipulating mode. There's tools for manipulating temperament. There's tools for designing chords, and all different types of tools built in. And the other thing is, so the tools all share some attributes. So one of them is that they all export code. So whatever you design in your tool where you're exploring this idea, you can use to export code for your project. The other is that the tools you can program the tool's behavior on the way in. So the drum machine, if you look at the code there was just one snare drum defined on the way in, but you could have multiple drums and have polyrhythms that you're designing, things like that. So you can add a lot of complexity on the way in just by programming the widget's behavior on the way in.
Yeah. So
yeah, go ahead, Devin.
Oh, just because I saw it pop up in the screen. So in that widget, for note value, it has 1/1, which means that you have one whole note. If you change it to 3/4, for example, exit out of this briefly. Yeah. So that fraction that you see within the rhythm maker where it says 1/1, right there, you found it. Click on the top and change that to a 3, and then change the one underneath to a 4. So that's telling it that there's 3 quarter notes. And now click on it, and now you're click on the rhythm maker to initiate it. Now you're out of 4/4 time, and now you're in 3/4 time. And it looks like it did its best. Can you clear it up, like by pressing the erase button at the bottom? Yeah. So now you're in a 3/4 meter. So there's different ways of expressing these things.
This is fabulous. And I know Dan has a question, but first I have to let everybody know that this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by ACI Learning. If you love IT Pro, you'll love ACI Learning and all they have to offer. ACI Learning has fully customizable training for your team in formats for all types of learners across audit, cybersecurity, and IT. From entry-level training to putting people on the moon, ACI Learning has got you covered. According to Robert Half, 62% of all tech managers plan to expand their teams in 2023, and 88% said it's challenging to find skilled workers to fill available roles. Take advantage of these opportunities and let ACI Learning help you get your IT tech career started. With ACI Learning, gaining these certifications and increasing your salary has never been easier. The most sought-after tech jobs in 2023 are cloud engineer, database developer, DevOps engineer, front-end developer, help desk tier 2 and 3, network administrator, network security engineer, software developer, software engineer, and system security manager. The average salary for an entry-level network administrator is around $75,000. ACI Learning's Network Support Specialist program provides the training needed to pursue or advance your career in networking, preparing you to take the CCNA certification exam and the CompTIA security and network certification exams. Ultimately, the big difference in salary comes down to specialization. The most popular certifications offered by ACI Learning include CISSP, CCNA, and CompTIA A+. Other in-demand tech skills and certifications offered are Technical Support Specialist, Computer User Support Specialist, Information Security Analyst, and more. Certifications show more than providing a skill set. They signal to employers that you as a professional are committed to keeping your skills up to date. ACI Learning offers fully customizable training for all types of learners, whether you prefer in-person, on-demand, or remote. Take your learning beyond the classroom and be prepared for your IT career. And it doesn't end with IT. Explore all ACI Learning offers with IT Pro, Audit Pro, including enterprise solutions, webinars, and the Skeptical Auditor podcast, practice labs, learning hubs, and their partnership program. ACI Learning supports organizations across audit, IT, and cybersecurity readiness. Maintain your company's competitive edge with ACI Learning and visit acilearning.com. That's acilearning.com. Okay, Dan, you had a question there. What?
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about using music blocks to teach music to kids particularly, but one thing I was really curious about and excited about is that it works both ways, because obviously you're also teaching them programming as well, and it's kind of solving two problems at the same time. If that, I was going to say killing two birds with one stone, all those metaphors, you've heard them before, all those kind of things. So one thing I wanted to quickly show, I'm going to give Ant something to do now quickly, is if we can bring up music blocks again. I wanted to quickly show, because Walter talked about this before, but you can get the code, you can get to see the JavaScript that is generating this. So if we go on the burger menu on the top right there, the kind of the three lines in the top right on the blue bar, and then press the two angle brackets. That's next one along to your right. There you go. I don't know if we can see much in that window. It might not be the right one, but one of the things I noticed very quickly was I can get the code up and see what it's actually doing and how it's generating what we're doing. So how does this work in a kind of a teaching programming kind of scenario? Can you get kids to programmatically generate some music and see the results quickly, get those results like you were talking about?
Let me start by saying, I'm going to quote Thelonious Monk.
Oh, wow.
Monk said, all musicians are subconsciously mathematicians. And we can also then quote Leibniz, sort of from the other perspective. Music's a hidden arithmetic exercise of the soul, which does not know that it's counting. So there's a long tradition of sort of the interplay between math and music, and that's certainly one of the things that we try to exploit in music blocks. So there's a lot of concepts in math. That's why we make the, for example, we make the note value explicitly a fraction, because we want the kids to understand there's fractions there, and they get a sense of a lot of they're learning a lot of math along the way. And I want to put a pin in this idea of musicians being math teachers and math teachers being musicians. A lot of my colleagues at MIT play instruments. That's the norm. That's not outside of the norm. But at the same time, I think there's an opportunity for a lot of musicians to get into some of the interesting concepts in math with the kids. And so there's that synergy there. In terms of programming, again, it's a programming language, so there's no avoiding some of the programming concepts. And we've done we've looked at a lot of the parallels between programming and music, and there are lots of them to exploit. So for just even something like a transposition is basically a transposition in programming. Or I might take something like a subroutine is basically an action in music blocks, but that's equivalent of a phrase in music. So there are a lot of ways in which we both implicitly and explicitly build these connections for the kids and for the teachers, and they get it. There's also a lot of, because it's a programming language in the web, we do a lot with interface. You can do interrupts. You can add little buttons to launch instruments. Kids do a lot of game programming with music blocks. And so when they do both the sort of the theme music for each of the characters in their games, and music that for the action and things like that as well. So there's just lots and lots of connections there.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking, because you've got, you talked about the links between music and mathematics, even simple concepts like a loop. In programming, we're gonna loop this. It's kind of like saying to the band, let's do this another 4 bars. Let's do this again, another 16 bars. You've got loops kind of built in, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, in fact, I mean, Dave, maybe Devin, do you want to elaborate a little bit on sort of the whole music teacher concept?
Well, I'm just going to dovetail from what Walter and Dan you were just talking about. So one of the most beautiful moments for me was so we did Google Code-In until they stopped hosting Google Code-In, which is like high school students. You would give them certain kinds of assignments and they could pick them. And one student, and this was the first example I'd ever seen, used like a variable, and put like the number 0 in it, and then played half of a phrase that had a first ending. And then when it completed the first ending, it ticked that 0 up to 1. And then it went through the phrase again. And there's a little test at the end of the phrase that said, if it equals 1, then go to the second ending. And my mind was blown when I saw this, because I was like, this so beautifully and elegantly expresses like what I think as I'm performing. Like in my mind, I have to keep track. I'm playing a phrase. Am I, have I played it once yet? Or, if I have, then I've got to play it again, but go to the second ending. So there's like these computational ideas that are inherent in music. And, language like music blocks helps you kind of like mine those ideas and express them in a new way, which, and so like what Walter was saying about, having musicians teach math, well, music blocks also helps them teach programming too. And we've had some music teachers that this was definitely the first time that they've even touched like a programming language. And this was, certainly out of their comfort zone to teach with music blocks. And we asked them like, teach with music blocks, go ahead and do this. Once they got over the first, few, hurdles, they really get it and they love it. And they can see how, these musical ideas are really well expressed with computation.
I want to just touch on Dan's original question, because I don't think I really actually answered it. And one way we think about music blocks not as a destination, but as a waypoint. Okay, so it's not you don't use music blocks forever. You use music blocks on the way to learning other things. So one of the ways we do that, Devin mentioned earlier, the fact that you can export your music, your composition, your code to Lillipond and sort of migrate from music blocks into more traditional representations of music. Another thing, Dan was showing the JavaScript export. So you can go from music blocks into JavaScript if you wanted to learn a little bit more about the underlying language in which music blocks is written. So the idea is that kids come to music blocks, they go off and learn some ideas and go off and do other things. They might come back to music blocks to explore things, but it's a part of the journey about becoming learned in music, becoming learned in math, becoming learned in computation and computational things. So it's a lot of fun. It's a great fun part of that journey, but it's not the entire learning experience.
Yeah, it's kind of like a launch pad or a jumping off point, isn't it? It's great because it can really spark curiosity or feed the curiosity of the kids into like, how does that make that sound, or how do I do this, or so on. It looks amazing. One of the things I really like about it as well is the fact that it will work anywhere, because it just runs in a browser, because you're running a JavaScript thing. So literally anybody can run it on, I would imagine, most devices, just by going in a web browser and typing in musicblocks.sugarlabs.org and waiting for it to come up. Was that one of the great driving reasons for using something like JavaScript, or was it just because you were already basing on a project that was kind of built in JavaScript?
No. I mean, we chose JavaScript because we just exactly for that reason we wanted to reach more kids. mean, a lot of the tools that we built in Sugar, again, as I said, they basically are, we wrote our own Linux desktop and built on top of GDK, and it's mostly Python based. And that's great for some kids who have access to, I mean, we originally did it for part of this project called One Laptop Per Child. We wrote the interface, the learning interface for One Laptop Per Child. But we weren't reaching as many kids as I think we can reach through a browser. So we decided to go that route with MusicBox.
Well, we're getting down into the very short rows here, and this is a totally fascinating show. It's a fabulous show. I was reminded that of an interview I heard with Paul McCartney once, where he said he actually doesn't ever stop composing, and his point was that we don't just read words, we speak words. We output as well as input, and there's no reason anybody should not compose music, or for that matter, compose code or go the other way. And I love the way one can learn mathematics and music at the same time, even, or see the connection between the two, and the math of one and the music of the other. This is a fabulous show. I hope Music Blocks is on GitHub. People can jump in and contribute. So that's an important thing. Want to get that out there. So to wrap up, we always ask, are there any things we haven't asked that you'd like us to have asked? And you can answer quickly. Walter's shaking his head.
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to just, there was a project at IBM back in the early 1980s called Writing to Read. Okay, and it was basically,
oh, wow.
you want to read, well, write. You know, and I really took a lot of inspiration from that project. I mean, again, it's long ago in a galaxy far, far away, but it's just, I mean, there's just this whole idea of again, learning through doing, and giving kids tools to allow them to engage. I mean, that's why it has to be free software.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you know, we're putting limits on them, and we want to give them, you know, we want them unbound.
As free software, is it GPL? Is that the
so it's AGPL.
AGPL.
So,
okay, great.
Web things.
Yeah. We always end with asking what your favorite text editor and scripting language are. So you have to get 4 answers out of this, doing my math.
Well, I'm an Emacs guy from way back, so
yeah. I would guess. And how about you, Devin?
I'm just going to keep the audience guessing.
That's fine too.
No, I also use Emacs. I understand the commands, and I love. Speaking of learn by doing, you know, from the very beginning, it's got a tutorial. Learn by doing.
Yeah,
that's so great.
That's the way to go. Well, it has been fabulous having you guys on the show. Love to hear how things go. Should have you back at some point to give us a progress report when you're overcome by demand, or whatever else may happen. That this has been great. And by the way, I miss Cambridge, and I miss Arlington and Newton and all those places, north of the river and south, by the way. So I love Boston too. Anyway, so great having you guys on.
Thanks thank you for having us.
Yeah.
So Dan, that was great.
Yeah, really great. I mean, it's such a great tool, and I love what they're doing in promoting, as I said, both programming and music, and this way of, you know, learning. I learned something today. I learned about what constructionism is. I ended up looking that up. I think I kind of understand it. I ended up looking that up after reading some of Walter's work on some other sites today. It said a lot about constructionism, and I come from this is not related really. I come from a family who are all, we would say builders over here. You'd say they were in construction over in the US.
Yeah.
So I looked at that and I was like, oh, constructionism, that sounds right up my street. So yeah, we liked building things with blocks and all that, and it all relates. All the metaphor all works for for blocks and all these things that we have in code and in music and so on. So yeah, really great. I would encourage everyone to just open your web browser, go to musicblocks. I'll get it right. musicblocks.sugarlabs.org, and it'll load. And it'll be fine. And you can try it out. Or, if you don't want to watch the video of us trying to prompt Ant to do stuff, we did a great job on that.
I'm going to follow up to myself. I'm so curious about this. And one of my great regrets is that I did not become as musical as I meant to be. I'm almost entirely a listener, but I would love
It's never too late.
Play with it. No, it's never too late. So what do you got we've gone kind of long on the show. So what would you like to plug, Dan?
I haven't got a massive amount to plug. You can check out, if you go to my website, danlynch.org, you can find stuff on there. My blog's really out of date. I need to update that. If you're in the UK, actually, no, wherever you are, actually, I was going to say if you're in the UK, but for everybody, I do a radio show now on Thursday nights, which you can find. I'll post the links on Twitter and Mastodon and all those sorts of places. But it's on the web. It's also streamed on the web, so you can find it. It's a hospital radio station that I help to support as well. So I play a strange mixture of various tunes. It's called the Midweek Pick and Mix is the name of the show. It's fun.
A hospital radio station, meaning that it broadcasts on airwaves.
Yeah,
you can get it on an FM radio or. Wow.
Yeah, I think this might be a purely British kind of tradition. I've mentioned it to a few friends and they were like, why do you have a hospital radio station? That doesn't make any sense. But it goes back in history over here for some reason. One of the things that they decided would be great for people in hospitals, which, they're sitting around, they want entertainment, they want information, they want all that kind of stuff, is to have radio stations in hospitals.
Wow.
So a lot of the kind of famous radio DJs and stuff over here started on hospital radio, and we still have hospital radio stations.
I'm a radio guy, and I've never heard of it, so this is interesting to me.
Yeah,
So-
I don't think they do it in other countries. I don't know why. But there you go. So yeah, we get to play requests for people in the wards and various things. I like to make silly jokes, like I'll play, I'll say this one's for everyone in the radiology department. This is Blondie with a tonic, or something like that. And that's not a great joke. I do have some better ones, I promise. Than that. So yeah, you can check that out. It's Arrow Sound. It's the Arrow Sound, as in arrow as in an arrow from a bow. Arrow Sound is the name of the station. If you search Arrow Sound Hospital Radio, you'll find it.
We'll get that in the show notes too. Yeah.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. Next week we have, I may mangle his name, but Alex Belokrilov, I believe it is. And he's going to be on the show. Should be interesting. Encourage everybody to come back again next week and to watch this episode as well as listen to it, because it was instructive. And thanks a lot. We'll see you all next time.
Hey folks, I'm Ant Pruitt and I have a question for you. How do you think your hardworking team, with a Club TWiT corporate subscription plan, of course, show your appreciation and reward your tech team with a subscription to Club TWiT? Keep everyone informed and entertained with podcasts covering the latest in tech. With the Club TWiT subscription, they get access to all of our podcasts ad-free. And they also get access to our members-only Discord, access to exclusive outtakes and behind-the-scenes footage and special content like the fireside chats that I enjoy hosting. Plus, they also get shows like Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, and the Untitled Linux Show. So go to twit.tv/clubtwit and look for corporate plans for complete details.